It was a quiet Thursday morning in Michigan, the kind of gray that makes the world feel paused. Martha Quinn sat by her kitchen window, sipping weak coffee from the same chipped mug she'd used since her son, Thomas, left for medical school. The phone rang, an unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Mrs. Quinn?" "This is Officer Alvarez with the Puerto Rico Coast Guard," a man's voice said, steady but cautious. "Ma'am, I'm afraid we've recovered something that may belong to your son." Her spoon froze midair. "My son's been gone for 2 years," she replied, her voice thin. "Yes, ma'am, I understand. But we need you to come down here. It's better if you see it yourself." Silence stretched. Martha looked toward the small framed photo of Thomas on her mantel, laughing, sunburned, standing in front of a hospital tent with a stethoscope around his neck. "What exactly did you find?" A pause. Then quietly, a box. It was locked inside a cabinet washed up near the harbor. The name carved on it says, "Harbor Institute." Martha's hand trembled. That name. She hadn't heard it in years. It was the project Thomas used to talk about, something he believed could change everything. But that dream sank with him, off the coast of Puerto Rico, the night his research boat capsized. The officer continued. "We traced the box through an old ID card inside. It has your son's name on it, Dr. Thomas Quinn. The strange part is, the ID was issued 3 months ago." For a full 10 seconds, Martha said nothing. Just the sound of her clock ticking and the low hum of the refrigerator. "That's impossible," she whispered. "He's dead." "I know, ma'am. But the file's official. It's been verified. We'll hold it for you here in San Juan, whenever you're ready." She hung up slowly, her chest tight. Then came that strange mix of hope and fear, the kind that makes your knees weak. 3 months ago, she murmured, someone used his name. That night, Martha pulled out an old storage box from under her bed. Newspaper clippings about the accident, condolence letters, a soaked photograph of the rescue boat. Every article had the same line, "No survivors found." Yet something deep inside her whispered, what if they were wrong? She booked a flight the next morning. The agent at the counter looked surprised when she asked for a ticket to Puerto Rico as soon as possible. At the San Juan Harbor office, the air smelled of salt and metal. Officer Alvarez met her at the dock, a tall man with kind eyes. He handed her a small wooden box, darkened by water, but carefully sealed. It was found near Ponce, he explained, inside an old buoy crate, no signs of tampering. Martha took it, her palms damp. The box felt heavier than it looked. She turned it over and saw the faint engraving. "For those forgotten by the tide." Her breath caught. Thomas had used that phrase in a letter years ago, talking about patients who couldn't afford treatment. Inside, she found a faded ID card, Thomas's photo, that familiar half-smile, but the issue date printed in clean black ink read, "Issued, March 2023. It was now June. Her stomach dropped. "How could this?" she muttered. Alvarez looked uneasy. "Mrs. Quinn, we've seen cases where identity theft happens, but this one, the system shows the card as active. Someone renewed his credentials through an internal medical registry." She blinked, stunned. "You mean someone out there is using my son's name? His license?" "Yes, ma'am, or—" He hesitated. "Someone who's supposed to be gone isn't." The room tilted. She sat down, clutching the edge of the table. "When my son died, they never found his body," she said, almost to herself. "They said the current was too strong." The officer nodded softly. The ocean keeps secrets, ma'am, but sometimes it returns what it takes. Martha stared at the card again. Her son's eyes stared back, bright, confident, alive. Driving back to her hotel, she couldn't stop replaying the last voicemail Thomas ever sent. Mom, don't worry if you don't hear from me for a bit. I'm heading somewhere remote, somewhere I can actually do something that matters. Those words haunted her. She'd thought he meant a research trip. Now, they sounded like a warning. That night, unable to sleep, she opened her laptop and searched Harbor Institute, Puerto Rico. Nothing came up, not even cached data. But in one forgotten archive, buried in an old Coast Guard incident report from 2019, she found a line that made her blood run cold. Unregistered medical facility near Ponce suspected of offshore operations. Report closed. No evidence found. She stared at it for a long time. Unregistered medical facility. Report closed. Outside, the waves hit the shore with rhythmic patience, as if counting time. She whispered to the dark, "Thomas, what were you doing down here?" The next morning, she stood on the balcony overlooking the sea, sunlight breaking through low clouds. Somewhere out there, under all that blue, was the truth, buried with her son? Or maybe not. She whispered, "If there's even a chance you're still out there, I'm coming." The phone buzzed again, another unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A woman's voice, soft but urgent, spoke in accented English. "Mrs. Quinn? Please, don't tell anyone what you found. They'll come for it." Martha's heart slammed against her ribs. "Who is this?" A pause. "Someone who worked with your son. Meet me in Ponce? You need to see what he left behind." The line went dead. Martha looked out at the endless water. The air was heavy with salt, fear, and something else. The faintest flicker of hope. She packed her bag slowly, folded the ID card inside her wallet, and whispered, "All right, Thomas, let's see what you were hiding." And with that, she started the engine. The road stretching south like a promise she wasn't ready to break. Because when the sea calls you by name, you don't ignore it. If you're still with me, hit that like button, leave a comment, or share this story. Sometimes one voice, yours, can bring another truth back to the surface. The road from San Juan to Ponce felt endless. The sun pressed down like a weight, the ocean flashing silver beside the highway. Martha hadn't been this far south since before Thomas died. Every mile made the air thicker, the memories louder. She stopped once at a gas station outside Guayama, bought a bottle of water, pretended she wasn't shaking. The man at the counter asked if she was on vacation. She smiled faintly and said, "Something like that." By the time she reached Ponce, the light had turned honey gold. The town looked tired but kind, pastel houses, rusted gates, old women sitting on porches watching the tide breathe in and out. She parked near the docks, across from a small cafe called El Faro, and sat there a moment, trying to remember how to breathe. That's when she saw her, a young woman wiping tables, dark-haired, tan skin, wearing hospital scrubs that didn't match. Martha almost looked away, until the girl froze, eyes wide, and whispered, "Mrs. Quinn?" Martha blinked. "Do I know you?" The girl came closer. "My name is Leah. I worked with your son, at the harbor." The world seemed to tilt. "That place doesn't exist anymore," Martha said. Leah shook her head. It was never supposed to. But it did. And it still does. They sat at the back of the cafe, the sound of gulls filling the silence between them. Leah's accent carried traces of Manila and San Juan, her voice low and careful. "Dr. Quinn wasn't supposed to die," she said, finally. "They made him disappear." Martha gripped her cup, her knuckles white. What are you saying? I'm saying he saved people the system refused to treat. Kids from poor families, from the islands, from everywhere. He created a clinic under the Harbor Foundation. No license, no approval. But it worked. Martha's heart hammered. That's impossible. The foundation's gone. I searched every record. They erased it, Leah whispered. And him. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere over the ocean. The storm always came fast here, like truth, sudden and messy. After Leah left for her shift, Martha walked along the beach until dusk. The shoreline was lined with salt-bleached boats and abandoned nets. She could smell medicine in the wind, that sterile, sharp scent Thomas used to bring home after work. She followed the road inland toward the old neighborhood where Thomas had lived. His house stood at the edge of town, half swallowed by vines, shutters hanging loose. The paint had peeled to reveal gray wood beneath, like skin losing color. A rusty sign on the gate read, "Property of Harbor Foundation. No entry." She touched the metal, cold even in the warm air. "Foundation," she murmured. "You did exist." Inside, dust hung thick. The living room still smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee. On the wall, a framed photograph. Thomas with a group of nurses. One of them was Leah, smiling shyly. Behind them, a blue tarp roof and the words, Harbor Medical Relief Unit. Her throat tightened. She whispered, "You were saving them, weren't you?" She wandered from room to room, charts stacked in boxes, expired medication bottles, a child's drawing pinned to a corkboard, a man with a stethoscope and the words, "Thank you, Dr. Quinn." In the kitchen, she found an envelope taped under the table. It held a receipt dated just 8 months ago. Medical supplies delivered to Harbor Clinic, Ponce Harbor District. The handwriting on the note looked achingly familiar. "Thomas," she breathed. That night, she couldn't sleep. Rain drummed on the windows, the air thick with salt. From her rented room, she could see the faint lights of ships moving across the horizon like restless souls. She wondered if one of them carried the truth. Or her son. The next morning, she returned to the cafe. Leah was there, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "Why are you helping me?" Martha asked. Leah hesitated. "Because he helped me first. When my visa expired, he kept me on under the foundation's name. Said paperwork shouldn't decide who gets to save a life." She looked down, voice trembling. He knew they were watching him. Medivance wanted his research. He refused to sell. Martha's breath caught. "And that's why?" Leah nodded. "They called it an accident, but everyone in the clinic knew it wasn't. The night before the explosion, he told us, if something happens to me, the harbor must stay open. People will come for it, protect it, and protect her." "Her who?" Leah hesitated. "I'll show you when you're ready." For the rest of the day, Martha walked the narrow streets of Ponce. Fishermen called out greetings in Spanish. A child rode past on a bicycle shouting, "Buenos dias, abuela." She smiled for the first time in days. The world here felt alive, unpolished, full of small kindnesses, the kind her son had believed in. Everywhere she turned, she saw traces of him. A medical poster with his handwriting, an old man at a fruit stand saying, "Dr. Quinn helped my grandson walk again." Each story was a breadcrumb leading deeper into who Thomas had become. By sunset, she stood on the pier, wind tangling her gray hair. The sea stretched endlessly south. Somewhere beyond the horizon was the truth. And maybe her son's last footprint, she whispered. "You said you wanted to change the world, Thomas. Maybe You did. The camera would fade slowly here, gulls circling, waves folding against the shore, as her voice softens into thought. When you lose someone, you think the story ends. But sometimes it just moves to another shore. The next morning was gray, heavy with the kind of silence that makes you second-guess everything. Martha stood in front of the house again, the same cracked windows, the same smell of salt and rot. Leah waited by the gate, glancing around nervously. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked. Martha nodded. "He built this place. Whatever's left, I need to see it." They slipped inside through the back, where ivy had torn through the wall. The floorboards creaked under their shoes. Dust floated in the light like slow snow. Everything felt frozen, mid-breath, as if someone had just stepped out for coffee and never came back. Leah pulled out a flashlight. "Downstairs," she whispered. A small door behind the kitchen led to narrow stairs. The air grew colder with every step. When they reached the bottom, Martha stopped. Her throat closed. The basement wasn't a basement anymore. It was a clinic. Old monitors hummed softly. Rusted IV poles stood like skeletons in the dim light. A row of beds lined the wall, tiny and low. Children's beds. Files covered a steel table, marked with numbers and names written in neat handwriting she recognized. She touched a folder. Case 07, leukemia, unapproved trial. Another read, Case 09, no insurance coverage. Her heart clenched. He was treating kids. Leah nodded. Ones no hospital would take. He found a way to help them. He made a formula, experimental, but it worked. Martha turned, eyes burning. Then why hide it? Why bury all this? Because saving them wasn't legal, Leah said quietly. He used compounds Medivance hadn't approved. They threatened to shut him down, so he went underground. Martha stared at the wall. On it hung a photograph. Thomas standing with a small group of doctors and nurses. 3 flags behind them, the U.S., the Philippines, and Puerto Rico. They were smiling, sunlight pouring through a tent flap. "He built an international clinic," Martha whispered. Leah exhaled shakily. They came from everywhere. Students, volunteers, young doctors who wanted to learn. He called it the harbor because he said, every lost ship needs somewhere to dock. Martha's hand trembled over the picture. "He didn't tell me. He said he was just doing outreach work. I thought he was being reckless." "He wasn't," Leah said. "He was trying to prove compassion can exist without permission." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of old machines filled the room like ghosts breathing. Then Leah handed her a small tape recorder. This was on his desk. Martha pressed play. Thomas's voice crackled through the static, tired but steady. "If you're hearing this, the harbor has fallen quiet. They'll call what we did illegal, maybe immoral. But if saving a dying child breaks the law, then maybe the law needs healing too." Martha shut her eyes. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "Do you understand now?" Leah said softly. "He didn't disappear for money or fame. He disappeared because he refused to stop." Martha sank into the nearest chair. "He always used to argue with me," she said. "He'd say, 'Mom, justice isn't paperwork, it's action.' I told him there were rules for a reason." She laughed bitterly. "Maybe I was wrong." Leah crouched beside her. "If you were in his place, and you had the cure in your hands but no license, would you save them or protect your career?" Martha looked at her sharply. "That's not fair." "It's exactly fair," Leah said. "That's the choice he made." The question hung there, raw and impossible. Martha wiped her eyes. He must have been terrified. He was, Leah said, but he believed someone had to start before the system would ever change. Martha stood, walking slowly around the room. She touched the cold metal of the beds, the notebooks filled with notes, formulas, half-finished charts. Each line felt like a heartbeat. This was his life's work, she murmured, and they turned it into evidence against him. From the corner, Leah picked up a small teddy bear wearing a hospital bracelet. Some of them survived, Mrs. Quinn. I still get messages. Kids from Manila, from San Juan, one from Detroit. They remember him. Martha smiled faintly, tears still wet. He always wanted to save the world, she said. I told him he couldn't. He said, maybe not the world, just one piece of it. Thunder rumbled outside. The basement lights flickered. Martha looked around one last time. We can't leave this here. Not to rot. Leah nodded. Then we don't. They carried what they could. Files, tapes, one of the old name tags. Upstairs into the pale afternoon light. The ocean roared in the distance, angry and alive. Standing by the window, Martha whispered, they called him reckless, but this is what courage looks like. Leah glanced at her. You sound like him. Martha laughed softly. Guess he didn't fall far from the tree. As they stepped outside, Martha looked back at the house one last time. He built a hospital out of faith and stubbornness, she said, and they called it a crime. The wind whipped through the palm trees. Somewhere in the distance, children's voices echoed near the docks. Bright, careless, alive. She turned to Leah. We're not done here, are we? Leah shook her head. No, ma'am, not even close. Martha straightened her shoulders. Then let's finish what he started. The camera would follow them as they walked down the dusty road, the sound of the sea rising behind. Her voice, steady now, would fade over the image. Sometimes justice doesn't wear a badge or a title. Sometimes it's just a mother refusing to forget. Hours slipped by inside that abandoned house. The air was thick with dust and ghosts. Martha sat surrounded by files she and Leah had pulled from the old clinic, patient charts, test results, medical notes. The handwriting was Thomas's. She traced each curve of his pen, like she was touching his voice. One folder sat apart from the others. Newer paper, cleaner edges. On the tab, a name was written in blue ink, Rachel Quinn. Her heart skipped. That's our name. Leah froze. You shouldn't. But Martha had already opened it. Inside were photos of a little girl, maybe 6 or 7, hooked to IV lines but smiling, bright eyes peeking from under a pink knit cap, notes scribbled underneath. Experimental therapy response. Stable. Subject improving. Risk level high. Martha's hands trembled. Who is she? Leah's eyes softened. I was hoping you'd find out in a better way. Find out what? She's your granddaughter. The room seemed to tilt. What did you just say? Leah nodded slowly. Thomas had a daughter. Rachel. He kept her hidden because her condition and the treatment weren't supposed to exist. Martha felt her chest tighten. Hidden? Why would he hide his own child? Because the therapy that saved her was illegal. Leah said quietly. She was one of the first children he cured. But if the authorities found out, they'd call it human experimentation. He saved her life, Mrs. Quinn, and it made him a criminal. Martha sank to her knees. I didn't even know he was a father. He didn't want to drag you into the danger. Medivance had already sent warnings. They wanted his research, and when he refused, they started watching him. He couldn't protect her and keep her visible at the same time. Martha stared at the photo again. The little girl's eyes looked familiar, wide and curious, like Thomas when he was young. Where is she now? Leah hesitated. Safe. That's all I can tell you, until I know we're not being followed. Martha's voice broke. You're telling me my son faked his life to save his daughter, and now they're both gone? Leah whispered. Not gone. Just hidden from people powerful enough to erase them. Martha pressed the photo to her chest. She's alive? Yes, Leah said, but she doesn't know who you are. She only knows the name Thomas Quinn from a bedtime story. Tears filled Martha's eyes. He made himself a ghost so she could live. Leah nodded. He called her the proof that compassion could survive in a world built on profit. Martha sat there for a long time, silent except for the slow creak of the house in the wind. He never told me. He always said he wasn't meant for family life. I thought he meant medicine took it from him. But it didn't, did it? It gave him one. Rachel was born sick, Leah said softly. Leukemia. He developed the serum trying to save her. That's how the harbor started. It wasn't a rebellion. It was love, disguised as research. Martha laughed weakly, wiping her tears. Of course it was. He always broke the rules for the right reasons. They went quiet. Outside, the waves crashed against the rocks like a heartbeat. After a moment, Leah said, he asked me to promise that if anything happened, I'd keep her safe until someone from his family came looking. And you think that's me? Martha said. I know it is. Martha looked down at her weathered hands. All this time, I thought I'd lost everything. Turns out, I didn't even know what I had. Leah placed her hand gently over Martha's. You can still choose what comes next. Martha took a deep breath, steadied herself. Tell me where she is. Not yet, Leah said. First, you need to understand what we're up against. If Medivance finds her, they'll take her back to finish what they started. She's living under another name now. But the moment they learn she survived the trial, they'll hunt her down. Martha's voice hardened. Then we won't let them. Leah nodded. That's what Thomas said. The two women sat side by side in the dim basement light. Martha studied the photos again, Rachel as a baby, then older, standing barefoot near the sea, her hair tangled by wind. Every picture was proof of a secret life her son had built with love and fear intertwined. She whispered, he gave everything for her. His career, his freedom, his name. Leah looked at her. He used to say, sometimes the cost of saving someone isn't measured in money. It's measured in silence. Martha exhaled shakily. He must have felt so alone. He wasn't, Leah said. He had us. And now he has you. Martha smiled through tears. You talk about him like he's still here. Leah glanced toward the stairwell, where sunlight cut through the dark like a blade. In a way, he is. Martha gathered the file carefully, almost reverently. I want to meet her, she said, even if it's from far away. Leah nodded. You will. But once you do, there's no going back. You'll be stepping into his fight, his enemies, his truth. I've already stepped in, Martha said quietly. The moment I opened that file, the wind rattled the windows upstairs. The house seemed to breathe. For a long moment, they stood in silence. Then Martha whispered, he hid a miracle into plain sight, and the world called it a crime. Leah smiled faintly. He used to call Rachel his second chance, the proof that good can grow even in a broken system. Martha looked at the photo again, the little girl's grin wide and fearless. If that's true, she said, her voice trembling but steady, Then maybe I've been given mine too. Leah squeezed her shoulder. You have, but we need to move fast. The harbor wasn't the only thing they erased. There's more buried out there. Evidence, research files, people who still believe in what he started. Martha's eyes lit with quiet resolve. Then let's bring them back. Leah nodded. He'd like that. Outside, the tide was rising again. The light shifted from gold to gray, waves pounding harder against the shore. Martha turned toward the window and whispered, You gave me back my family, Thomas, and I'll make sure no one buries your truth again. As the sound of the sea swelled around them, her voice softened into the closing line of the scene. Sometimes love doesn't end when someone's gone. Sometimes it's just waiting for the courage to be found. Rain hammered against the hotel window as Martha spread the papers across the bedspread. Leah sat beside her, laptop open, scanning through folders they'd taken from the harbor house. Each file looked older, more fragile, but one caught Martha's eye. It wasn't a patient chart this time. It was government style, printed on thick paper with embossed seals. At the top, in bold letters, Certificate of Death. Her stomach turned. No, she whispered. Leah leaned in. What is it? Martha's voice cracked. It's Thomas's death certificate. For a long moment, neither of them breathed. Then Leah said softly, Maybe it's a copy. But something was off. The document wasn't issued by the Puerto Rican authorities. The header read, Medivance Biotech Corporation. Since when does a private company issue death certificates? Martha muttered. She turned the page over, fingers shaking. It was signed by Dr. Alan Coven, CEO of Medivance. Leah's face went pale. Oh my God. Martha felt her pulse pound in her ears. He wasn't declared dead by the Coast Guard. He was declared dead by them. They buried him on paper. She pushed aside the folder, hands trembling, and picked up another. There were internal memos, email printouts, lab notes, all stamped confidential. One memo, dated 2 years ago, read, Quinn's formula poses threat to proprietary portfolio. Expedite neutralization strategy. Ensure legal closure. Post-incident. Neutralization strategy, Martha whispered. That's corporate language for murder. Leah scrolled through her laptop, pulling up a scanned version of the same file from Medivance's archive leak. They deleted him from their system the same day the explosion happened, she said. Look, time-stamped 5 hours before the ship even left port. Martha's throat went dry. They killed my son before he even set sail. The room felt smaller. Rain blurred the world outside into streaks of gray. Martha stood, pacing. They said it was a lab fire. They said it was an accident. And I believed them. She pressed her hands to her face, choking back tears. I buried an empty coffin. Leah closed the laptop gently. He tried to expose them. That formula he created, it wasn't just a cheaper drug, Mrs. Quinn. It was a cure, one injection that could save thousands of children without patents or price tags. He wanted it open source. Martha looked at her sharply. And for that, they killed him? Yes, Leah said. Because if he went public, Medivance would lose billions. Every child saved by his serum was a child who wouldn't need theirs. Martha sat down slowly. The paper crinkled in her hand. He told me once that truth had a cost. I didn't think it would be his life. Silence hung heavy between them. After a while, Leah spoke again. We can prove this. There's enough evidence here to reopen the case, to make them answer for it. Martha shook her head. Not yet. If we show them what we have, they'll bury us too. We need something they can't deny, something they can't destroy. She stared at the signature again. Alan Coven, CEO. It burned into her mind like a scar. That man signed my son's death with a pen, she said, and I'm going to make him answer for it. Leah hesitated. That's dangerous. He controls everything. Lawyers, politicians, the media. Martha met her gaze, eyes hard. Then we don't go through them. We go around them. She gathered the files into a neat pile, her movements steady now, almost calm. If they killed my son to hide the truth, I'll bring the truth back to life. Piece by piece, Leah whispered. What are you planning to do? Martha looked toward the window, where lightning lit the sea for just a second. I'm going to dig him up. His grave? No, she said. His story. She sat back down, spreading out the documents again. We'll start with the fake reports. The medical journals Medavance owns, the charity fronts they use to clean their image. Every lie they told. We'll trace it to the source. Leah nodded slowly. I still have contacts from the clinic, doctors who left, because they couldn't stomach what Medavance was doing. If we can get them to talk. Good, Martha said. We'll need witnesses and records. I don't care if I have to knock on every door from here to Washington. She stopped, staring at the certificate again. The edges were damp from her hands. Do you see this? She said, voice low. This isn't just paper. This is a weapon. They used it to erase him, Leah whispered. Then we'll use it to bring him back. Martha's eyes softened, but her tone stayed firm. When my husband died, Thomas told me, grief was love with nowhere to go. Maybe now I finally know where to put it. Leah leaned forward. You're not alone in this. I know, Martha said quietly, but it started with me. It has to end with me too. She packed the folders into a waterproof bag, every motion deliberate. Outside, thunder rumbled over the sea. Leah said, You realize they'll come after you. Martha looked out at the storm and gave a faint, bitter smile. They already did. They just forgot to check if I could swim. For a moment, there was only the sound of rain. Then she whispered, almost to herself, They signed my son's death certificate. I'll make sure the world signs theirs. The lights flickered, wind howling through the cracks of the window. She turned to Leah. Tomorrow, we find Coven. Leah nodded. Then what? Then, Martha said, her voice like steel wrapped in sorrow. We see if he still thinks a human life is worth less than a stock price. The camera would linger on her face, grief, resolve, fury, all woven into one quiet expression. And, as thunder cracked again, her final words for the scene would echo softly over the storm. If they bury justice with my son, I'll dig until the earth bleeds. If this moment broke your heart, share it. Someone out there needs to hear that even when truth is buried, a mother's hands can still uncover it. The next morning, the world seemed too quiet. Even the sea outside the hotel didn't roar the way it used to. Leah was sitting at the desk, scanning through emails, when Martha said, calm but steady, set up a meeting. Leah looked up. With who? With the devil himself. A few calls later, they had it. A private consultation with Dr. Alan Coven, CEO of Medavance. Martha was to pose as a potential investor from a philanthropic trust. She borrowed a gray suit from Leah's cousin, pinned her silver hair up, and practiced her smile in the mirror, the kind that hides bullets behind politeness. By evening, they were in San Juan, the city lights spilling like gold veins across the coast. The Medavance Tower rose above the skyline, glass and arrogance glinting in the rain. Inside, everything smelled like money and antiseptic. Martha held a small recording pen in her palm, tiny, silent, waiting. Coven walked in exactly on time. Impeccably dressed, smooth voice, charm rehearsed like a speech he'd given 1,000 times. "Mrs. Quinn," he said, shaking her hand, "I hear you represent the Harbor Trust." Her heart skipped at the word. "Yes," she said evenly. "A small foundation with global interests. We're considering a long-term partnership with Metavance, provided we understand your ethical stance." He smiled. That thin plastic smile CEOs give when they think they're in control. "Ah, ethics. Always a fascinating topic. Please sit." They sat across a sleek marble table. Rain tapped faintly against the glass wall. Martha leaned forward. "Dr. Coven, I've read about your work, about your decision to shut down unlicensed medical operations around the Caribbean. Some say you did it to protect patients. Others think it was about competition." He chuckled softly. "Competition? No. Control. There's a difference. When people play doctor outside the system, they don't just risk lives, they risk the entire market's stability." "The market?" she repeated. "Medicine," he said, folding his hands, "is business first. Compassion is optional." For a moment, Martha said nothing. Her pulse thudded in her throat. "So, if someone were saving children but not making you profit, that would be a threat?" He smiled again. "If someone cured children without us, Mrs. Quinn, we'd have a very big problem. Imagine a drug that works too well, costs too little. Investors would flee, pharmacies would collapse, chaos." Her voice was low. "Or imagine the opposite. Children dying because someone thought profit mattered more." He looked at her, amused. "You sound emotional." "I am," she said. "I lost someone who believed medicine should serve life, not money." Coven tilted his head. So this is personal." "Yes," she said, deeply. He leaned back, watching her. "Let me tell you something honest, Mrs. Quinn. Human life is a currency. We all trade in it, one way or another. Governments, charities, corporations. The only difference is, some of us are smart enough to make it profitable." The words sliced through her like ice, but she didn't flinch. She just looked at him and whispered, "You killed him, didn't you?" Coven blinked. "Excuse me?" "My son," she said softly. "Dr. Thomas Quinn. You erased him because he made something you couldn't own." For the first time, the smile slipped. "Mrs. Quinn, that's a dangerous accusation." "Not an accusation," she said. "A fact." He exhaled slowly, then smiled again, colder this time. Thomas Quinn was a reckless idealist. He broke the law. His methods endangered lives. We simply ensured the consequences matched the crime. Her jaw tightened. "You wrote his death certificate." He shrugged. Someone had to close the file. The rain outside had turned into a downpour, streaking the glass like tears. Martha's hand tightened around the recording pen hidden in her palm. Coven continued, his voice almost gentle. "You seem like a good woman, Mrs. Quinn, but your son, he was naive. He thought compassion could change systems built on money. That's not how the world works. You can't feed morality to shareholders." Martha's voice broke through the silence, quiet but cutting. "If saving a life threatens your system, maybe it's your system that's sick." Coven smiled faintly. "Idealism doesn't pay the bills." "Neither does guilt," she said. For the first time, he paused. Something flickered behind his eyes. Irritation. Maybe curiosity. "You're braver than most. But Tell me, Mrs. Quinn, if it were your son's company, your fortune, your power on the line, would you still give away the cure? Would you destroy everything you built for strangers? She looked straight at him. If one of those strangers was my child, yes. He laughed softly. That's the thing about mothers. You think love changes the world. It doesn't. It just ruins good business. Martha leaned in, voice trembling but fierce. Then I hope your business drowns in it. Silence stretched. Only the storm spoke now, wind hammering against the windows like waves. Finally, he stood. This meeting is over. But she stayed seated, her voice calm, steady. One more question, Dr. Coven. He turned back. If your child were dying and the cure was free, would you let him die to protect your stock price? He hesitated, just for a second. Then his mask returned. I don't deal in hypotheticals. Martha rose too, her height barely reaching his shoulder, but her presence filling the room. You don't deal in humanity either. She walked toward the door, the pen still recording in her palm. Before leaving, she looked back once. You can erase names from paper, she said, but not from conscience. Outside, Leah was waiting in the lobby, nerves tight. Martha handed her the pen without a word. Leah asked softly, Did he say it? Martha nodded. Every word. The world deserves to hear the devil speak for himself. They stepped into the storm, the sound of thunder swallowing the city. As they walked down the wet street, Martha whispered, almost to herself, He thinks mothers can't change the world. He's about to find out we've been doing it quietly for centuries. The morning sun spilled through the hotel blinds, warm and merciless, like truth after a long night of lies. Martha sat at the edge of the bed, the recording pen in her hand. It looked small, too small to carry something so powerful. Leah paced the room, eyes darting between her laptop and the window. Are you sure about this? She asked. Martha didn't look up. He signed my son's death, she said quietly. Now, he can sign his own. At noon, they met again at Medavant's headquarters. This time, Martha was calm, steady, almost polite. The meeting was framed as a follow-up to finalize her investment. Coven greeted her with his usual smooth arrogance. Mrs. Quinn, he said, shaking her hand, I trust you've made your decision. Oh, I have, she replied. I'm ready to sign. He smiled, leading her into a private boardroom with glass walls and city views that screamed invincibility. A stack of papers sat in front of her. A standard confidentiality agreement, he said. You'll receive the transfer once it's signed. Martha nodded, pretending to skim through. The pen was already recording. Coven leaned back. You're doing the right thing. Sometimes staying quiet is the most moral choice. Martha smiled faintly. You really believe that? He shrugged. The world runs on silence, Mrs. Quinn. The moment people start shouting about justice, economies collapse, markets panic, people lose jobs. We keep things stable. She met his gaze. By killing my son? His expression didn't change, but his voice softened. He was a brilliant man, but he didn't understand scale. He wanted to give the world something it wasn't ready for. Martha's voice was calm. A cure, a disruption, he corrected. If you save everyone, no one pays. For a second, the room went still. Then Martha picked up the pen and signed her name. There, she said. Now we both have what we want. Coven smiled thinly. I doubt that. But as he reached for the papers, Leah, sitting quietly by the door, hit a single key on her laptop. The screen behind them lit up. The Medavant's logo disappeared, replaced by a streaming interface. A red icon blinked. Live. Thousands of comments began to flood the feed. Names, flags, hearts, angry emojis. The recording played, Coven's voice echoing across the internet. Medicine is business first. Compassion is optional. Human life is currency. If you save everyone, no one pays. Coven froze. What the hell is this? Leah's voice was steady. The whole world's hearing what you said. Martha rose slowly, her voice trembling but fierce. You wanted silence, Dr. Coven, but silence is a choice you no longer own. Security burst through the door, but the live stream had already gone viral. Major news outlets were joining, screenshots flying across Twitter, Reddit, TikTok. Medivance's stock ticker flashed red. On the screen, Coven's voice played again, calm, confident, monstrous. We simply ensured the consequences matched the crime. You can't feed morality to shareholders. Coven lunged toward Leah, shouting, "Turn it off." But Martha stepped in front of him. My son tried to tell the truth. You called that a crime. Now the world gets to decide which of you was right. Coven's face twisted, rage breaking through his perfect mask. Do you have any idea what you've done? Yes, Martha said quietly. I've done what mothers do best. I protected my child, she turned to Leah. End it when he says the words. Leah nodded. On the recording, Coven's voice came through again, the moment that sealed everything. We erased him to protect the stock. The room erupted. Leah stopped the stream. The damage was already irreparable. Thousands of shares were being dumped by the second. Whistleblowers were tagging Medivance's name in old documents, employees leaking emails, journalists digging up the Harbor case. Coven sank into his chair, pale and shaking. You'll regret this. Martha leaned in close. No, she whispered. You will. They walked out without looking back. Cameras were already waiting outside, the crowd buzzing, phones lifted like torches. Someone shouted, Is it true? Another voice yelled, She's the mother. Leah tried to hurry her through, but Martha stopped on the steps. The ocean breeze hit her face. For the first time in 2 years, she felt like she could breathe. Behind her, reporters called out questions. Mrs. Quinn, what did he say? What really happened to your son? Martha looked at them and said simply, The truth finally spoke for itself. They drove back toward the coast in silence. The car radio was already playing the story. Breaking news, Medivance CEO, Alan Coven under investigation. After leaked recording exposes corporate cover-up. Leah turned it down. We did it, she whispered. Martha stared out the window, voice soft. He's free now. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Martha said, Leah, yeah? Do you believe in justice? Leah smiled faintly. After tonight, I believe in mothers. Martha let out a quiet laugh. Then maybe that's enough. When they reached the harbor, the sea was calm again. The sky had started to blush with dawn. Martha stepped out, her reflection rippling across the water. She whispered to the wind, You were right, Thomas. The truth doesn't drown. It just waits for the right tide. She turned to Leah, the faintest smile crossing her face. Let's go home. And as they walked down the pier, the last shot lingered on her face, weathered but radiant, while a newscaster's voice faded in. Viewers around the world are calling her the mother who made the devil confess. The world moved fast after the recording, too fast for anyone to stop it. Within 24 hours, every news outlet from San Juan to New York was replaying the same line over and over again. We erased him to protect the stock. It became the sentence that broke Medivance. Martha watched from her small balcony overlooking the harbor, the same sea that once took her son away. The sun was rising slow and golden, and, for the first time, it didn't feel cruel. She could hear seagulls again. She could hear life. Leah walked in, holding her phone. "It's everywhere," she said, her voice half shocked, half relieved. "The investigation's official. The board suspended Coven this morning. They froze all assets connected to the Harbor Institute case." Martha nodded quietly. "The sea always returns what it takes," she said. Leah smiled. "You did it, Mrs. Quinn." Martha looked at her. "No, we did. You, me, and every mother who ever buried her truth because the world said it was inconvenient." Down below, reporters were gathered near the dock, shouting her name. Someone had painted words on the seawall overnight. "The mother of the harbor." She whispered, half to herself, "I never wanted to be known. I just wanted them to remember him." Later that day, she visited the Harbor Foundation site. It was quiet, stripped bare after the raids, just the skeleton of a dream. But inside the main room, sunlight spilled across the floor, hitting an old photo on the wall. Thomas stood there, surrounded by children from 3 countries, smiling like he never feared anything. Leah placed a new brass plaque beneath it, the Harbor School for Humanitarian Medicine. Martha traced her fingers over the words. "He believed people could learn compassion," she said softly. "Maybe now they finally will." That afternoon, a small press conference took place by the sea. Cameras clicked, waves murmured, and Martha stood beside Leah and a girl with long dark curls. Rachel, now 14, the child her son had saved. Reporters leaned forward as Martha spoke. "This isn't a story about revenge," she said. "It's a story about what happens when love refuses to stay quiet. My son believed medicine should belong to everyone. Today, that belief belongs to all of us." A journalist shouted, "Mrs. Quinn, what's next for you?" Martha looked at Rachel, who was clutching her hand tightly. "We rebuild," she said simply. "The Harbor School will reopen, this time in the open, with permission, with light. We'll train healers, not employees. We'll teach that compassion isn't a crime." The crowd clapped, some wiping tears. Rachel turned to her grandmother and whispered, "Grandma, we can really save other kids now, right?" Martha smiled, eyes glistening. "Yes, baby. That's what your father wanted." Behind them, the sea shimmered, calm and endless. That night, as the story spread worldwide, people began calling Martha the mother of the sea. Messages poured in from Michigan, Manila, Havana, Nairobi. Mothers, nurses, doctors, teachers, strangers writing, "Thank you for reminding us that truth can still win." Leah scrolled through the messages, laughing softly. "Look at this. Someone in Vietnam named her clinic after the harbor." Martha chuckled. Thomas would have liked that. He always said kindness has no border. For the first time in years, the world felt bigger, but not lonely. She walked down to the shoreline before sunset. Rachel ran ahead, chasing waves. Leah followed, recording the moment for their new foundation site. Martha stood there, watching the tide roll in, the same sea that had once hidden so much pain, now glowing orange and gold. She said quietly, "The sea doesn't take sides. It just listens." And today, it finally spoke. Rachel came running back, breathless. "Grandma! Grandma!" They said the president of Medavance got arrested. Martha smiled gently. "Good. Then maybe the tide's turning." They stood together, 3 generations of women, the air soft and full of salt and forgiveness. Leah looked out at the horizon. So, what do we call this next chapter? Martha thought for a moment. Hope, she said. That's all it ever needed to be. As the camera panned out, the sound of the ocean grew louder, waves folding into one another, steady and eternal. News anchors narrated over the footage. Medavance executives face criminal charges after a global leak exposed unethical trials. Meanwhile, a small school in Puerto Rico, founded by the mother of the late Dr. Thomas Quinn, is set to reopen, teaching medical ethics and humanitarian care. Martha's voice faded in, warm and resolute. When the truth comes back from the deep, it doesn't shout. It just breathes again. Rachel slipped her hand into hers. Grandma, she whispered, will you tell me about him again? Martha smiled. Every night until you remember him by heart. And as the waves curled against the shore, the sun dipped low, the sky glowing like forgiveness itself, a quiet promise that justice, once awakened, never goes back to sleep. The house was quiet that morning, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty, just full of peace. The storm had passed, the headlines had slowed, and the world had finally moved from chaos to reflection. Martha sat by the window, a soft breeze coming from the sea. On the desk before her lay a single sheet of paper, her handwriting careful and trembling. She had started it 3 times already. This time, she didn't cross anything out. She just let her heart speak. Dear Thomas, she wrote, I used to think justice was something we had to chase, something buried under layers of law or power or luck. But maybe justice was never lost. Maybe it was just waiting for someone to stop running from it. She paused, looking out at the horizon. The sea shimmered under the early sun, calm and infinite. You were right, my love. The sea doesn't take. It holds. Every truth, every secret, every promise we whisper into it. And when the time is right, it gives them back. That's what it did for me. It gave me back you. Not in body, but in purpose. She folded the page slightly, feeling the indent of her pen through the paper. Her voice in the narration was soft, but certain. I've learned that love doesn't end when life does. It just changes its address. You taught me that medicine isn't about saving lives on paper. It's about saving hope in people. And now, that hope has a name again. Rachel. From outside came laughter. Leah and Rachel planting small herbs behind the New Harbor School. Martha smiled, listening to their voices echo like music across the sand. She has your eyes, she continued. The same fire that refuses to look away when something's wrong. I see you every time she speaks her mind, every time she holds a patient's hand. Maybe that's how love lives on, by multiplying in others. A tear rolled down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. For a long time, I blamed the sea for taking you. I screamed at it, hated it, feared it. But now, I understand. It wasn't punishing me. It was teaching me. It taught me patience. It taught me that truth doesn't drown. It just waits for the right tide. She folded the letter carefully, placed it in a small glass bottle, and sealed it with wax. Then she carried it outside. Leah looked up and smiled softly, sensing what she was about to do. Rachel ran up beside her. Grandma, what's that? A letter, Martha said, her tone warm and tender. For the waves. Rachel tilted her head. Will he read it? Martha looked at the sea, then back at the girl. He already has. They walked together to the water's edge. The wind brushed through Martha's gray hair as she knelt and placed the bottle in the tide. It drifted slowly, then caught the current, carried farther and farther. until it became a tiny shimmer in the morning light. Her voiceover continued, gentle, steady. The sea doesn't forget anyone. It remembers what the world tries to bury. It remembers names, promises, and the sound of truth when it's finally spoken. It reminds us that every life, no matter how small, leaves a wave behind. Rachel slipped her small hand into Martha's. Do you think he knows we're okay now? Martha smiled, her voice barely above a whisper. He does. Because peace isn't something we find. It's something we choose. Leah walked over, holding a camera. Should I film this for the Harbor school page? Martha shook her head gently. No. Some things are meant to be remembered, not broadcast. The three of them stood there in silence as the waves rolled in, soft and rhythmic, like breathing. You taught me, the letter continued in her narration, that kindness doesn't need permission to exist. That the smallest act of courage can echo louder than any corporation, any courtroom, any fear. And maybe forgiveness is the final form of justice. She took a deep breath, letting the sea air fill her lungs. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the weight of loss, only gratitude. Leah put her arm around her. He'd be proud, you know. Martha smiled. No, he'd tell me I took too long. They both laughed softly. As the camera slowly pulled back, the shoreline stretched endlessly, the bottle now just a glint far away, carried by the current toward the horizon. Her final words played over the image, calm and resolute. Dear son, I've finally learned what you tried to teach me. That love doesn't need a license, and compassion doesn't ask for permission. Wherever you are, the sea, the sky, or somewhere beyond both, I hope you know that your light didn't drown. It found its way home, and with that, the scene faded to the sound of gentle waves, the ocean whispering like a heartbeat, steady, forgiving, eternal. If you heard her story, would you believe it? A retired teacher from Michigan who crossed an ocean to find the truth about her son. A mother who uncovered a billion-dollar lie, not with power or money, but with a single voice that refused to break. Some called her foolish, some called her dangerous, but the world called her what she truly was, brave. When the waves carried her letter out to sea, she didn't expect the world to write back. Yet, it did. From Puerto Rico to Manila, from Detroit to Hanoi, people began to speak her name, not as a headline, but as a promise that compassion still exists. And maybe that's the real story. Not the scandal, not the corporation, not even the justice that followed, but the reminder that somewhere between loss and truth, one person can still move the tide. So I want to ask you something. If one day you discovered the truth buried under silence, what would you do? Would you look away? Or would you stand up like Martha did? Because sometimes justice doesn't begin in a courtroom. It begins in a kitchen, with a mother holding a photo and whispering, "This isn't over." Sometimes it starts when one person says, "Enough." And sometimes it starts right here, with you. If her story reached you tonight, don't let it end here. Let the waves carry it forward. Tell someone what you felt. Share it, comment below, and write the name of your city. Let the world see where compassion still breathes. From Puerto Rico, from Michigan, from Manila, from wherever you are watching, let's remind the world that humanity isn't gone. It's just waiting for someone brave enough to speak it out loud. Because truth, like the sea, never really disappears. It only waits for someone to listen. So, if you heard her story, tell us where you are. Let the waves of kindness reach your shore, too.